back to our science class here in my YouTube channel. Now, in our video today, the focus of our discussion would all about be the module 3 of your Science 9 module, and it would all about be inorganic compounds. Okay, so if you would all know, we have two kinds of compounds. Those are organic compounds and inorganic compounds. Now, in our video lesson today, we will first talk about the inorganic compounds. Now, in inorganic compounds, we will somewhat go back to the discussion of the ionic compounds because ionic compounds are one of the considered inorganic compounds. Now, on this lesson, let us first start with the word ion. So, to start the discussion about the inorganic compounds, let us first have the word ions. Now, yung ions ay nabanggit ko na sa discussion ko ng video lesson ko tungkol sa finding the value of proton, value of electron, and value of neutron. So, yung ions natin are considered atom or molecule having a net charge. So, yung charge na tinutukoy natin are the positive charge and the negative charge. So, meaning to say, in the inorganic compounds, you will encounter a net charge in the atom or molecules of either positive and negatives. So, the question is, how do we produce ions? Paano nga ba napoproduce ang ions of positive charge and negative charge sa isang atom or molecule? Okay, so paano ba tayo nagpo-produce ng ion sa isang atom or molecule? So for example, I have an atom of sodium which has a symbol of Na. So para mai-produce natin ang ion ng sodium or ng Na, kukuha tayo ng isang neutral atom. So for example, that sodium Na is a neutral atom. When we say neutral, wala pa siyang charge or wala pa siyang positive charge or negative charge. So we have as simple as Na. Now, yung Na natin has an atomic number of 11. Nung tinuro ko sa inyo in the previous video lesson about finding the value of proton and value of electron, ang sabi ko sa discussion ko, nanggagaling ang number of proton and number of electron sa kanyang atomic number. So, meaning to say, if the atomic number of sodium is 11, then the value of its proton will be 11 and the value of its electron will also be 11. So, yung tinatawag nating neutral atom. When we say neutral, the atom has no charge of either positive or negative. So, para may palabas natin ang ion, so para makapag-produce tayo ng ion sa isang atom na kagaya ng sodium, kukuha tayo or we will take from the neutral atom either adding or removing one or more electrons. So, para mapakita natin ang kanyang ion, kukuha tayo o magdadagdag tayo ng electrons sa ating neutral atom. Since ang sodium natin ay matatagpuan sa metals, ang isang sodium ay kasama sa grupo ng metals at isa siyang klase ng element na metal. Ano bang ginagawa ng ating metal? Is it gaining or losing? So, metals, tatandaan natin, those are the one that lose electron. When we say lose electron, sila yung nagre-remove ng electrons. Ngayon, dahil ang ating sodium ay nasa group 1, group 1A, so ilang electrons ang ilulose ng ating sodium. So, yung ating sodium ay maglulose ng isang electrons. So, ngayon, ito na yung magiging ion nung ating sodium. So, from sodium natin na neutral, kapag nilagyan natin siya ng ion, now ang proton niya is magiging 11 pa rin. And electron will now become 10. Bakit 10? Kasi nag-lose siya ng isang electron since siya ay nasa group 1A, metals always lose or nagre-remove ng kanilang electrons. That's why, pag nalagyan na natin siya ng ions, nagkaroon siya ng 10 electrons. Ilan ang nawala sa kanya? Isa. So, magkakaroon ka ngayon ng Na, the symbol of sodium, and then positive. Bakit positive? Kasi kung sino yung nag-lose, it will become positive ion. The one that loses electron will have the positive ion or the positive charge. Ilan yung nawala sa kanya? Isa. And number 1 is already understood at hindi na natin pa kailangang isulat. So, yan yung tinutukoy natin sa salitang ion or formation of ion. Formation of ion will only happen if an element will lose or gain electrons. Okay, so let us now discuss about the inorganic compounds. So an example of inorganic compounds is the ionic compounds, which composed of a metal and a non-metal. Now, you always take note that metals will be the positive ions and the non-metals will be the negative ions. Kagaya ng example natin kanina, which is sodium. Sodium is a kind of metal from group 1A. So that means, after the formation of ion, nagkaroon siya ng positive charge because metals are the positive charge and the non-metals will become the negative charge. Now, the positive ions are called cations. C-A-T-I-O-N. So the positive ions named as cations formed when one or more electrons loses their electron. Kagaya ng example natin kanina. So take note, you always take note that the metals will lose electrons. And if they lose electrons, they are the positive ions. And positive ions is called cations. At sa kabaliktaran, the non-metals are the one that gains. Gains, ibig sabihin sila yung tumatanggap. Gains electron. And if they gain an electron, they will become the negative ions. And negative ions are called anion. So, yan yung kailangan mong tandaan in the inorganic compounds, especially in the formation of ions, metal, and the non-metal. Kaya sa last video natin on the previous week, inaral natin mabuti ang mga elements that belongs to metal and non-metal so that kapag nag-formation tayo ng ions, alam na alam mo kung siya ay isang positive ion or a negative ion. Okay, so let us have this comparison with the metal and the non-metal. So the metals having group 1A, group 2A, and group 3A. So yan yung tatandaan mo kung nasaang grupo o family ang isang element. So lahat ng element na nasa group 1A, which is a metal, will have an ion of 1 positive. Isang positive charge para sa lahat ng element na matatagpuan mo sa group 1A. Ano lang bang kailangan mong tandaan sa iyong isip? Kung ano ang kanilang group, number, ganun din ang ions na kanilang ilulose or i-remove. Take note ha, this is metals and metals always lose electrons. At lahat ng nasa group 1A ay nag-lose o nagbibitaw ng isang electron, kaya meron silang ions of 1 positive. And of course, lahat ng element na nasa group 2A ay maglo-lose ng dalawang electron. That's why they have a charge of 2 positive. And for group 3A, hindi lahat ng nasa group 3A na element ay kasali. It only be the aluminum. So this only strictly for aluminum. And aluminum found in group 3A will lose electrons of 3. That's why the ion will become 3 positive. So these are positive 1 ion, positive 2 ion, and then positive 3 ions for groups 1, group 2, and group 3 of metals. So pagdating naman sa non-metals that is found on group 7A, lahat ng elements na makikita mo sa group 7A ay mag-gain o tatanggap ng, syempre hindi 7. Ang kailangan nila ay 1 para maging stable. So ang tatanggapin nila ay isang electron, at dahil nag-gain sila ng electron, they will become negative ion. So it will have 1 negative because it gains 1 electron to be stable. Non-metals will gain. Then, for group 6A, lahat ng elements na makikita mo sa group 6 will gain, of course, 2 electrons. So it will have an ion of 2 negative. And then for the last, which is group number 5, take note that in group number 5, hindi lahat ng nasa group 5 ay kasali. It would only be the nitrogen and the phosphorus. So yung nitrogen lang at phosphorus ang isasama natin sa group 5A na nag-gain ng, dahil nasa group 5, kulang na lang sila ng 3 to be stable. That's why they are gaining 3 electrons. At dahil nag-gain sila ng electrons, then their ions will become negative ions. So 7 will have a negative 1, 6 will have negative 2, and then group 5, which is nitrogen and phosphorus only, will gain 3 ions, 3 negative ions. Okay, so we only mentioned a few elements in the periodic table, and there are elements that are not mentioned in our discussion on the metal and the non-metal. So kung hindi sila kasali, saan sila belong? So itong diniscuss natin na nauna, from groups 1, 2, 3, and groups 7, 6, and 5, those are called monoatomic ions. At ang lahat ng elements na hindi nabanggit o hindi kasama sa ating na-discuss ay kasali sa mga ions na may 1, 2, o 3 o higit pang ions. Example is copper, Cu copper, it composed of 2 ions. That's why they are not mentioned in the previous discussion on the metal and non-metal. Okay, so let us have these guidelines in the formation of ions. So the first guideline is cations are always listed before anions. So you always take note na nauunang cation isulat bago ang anion. So hindi sila pwede magkapalit ng pwesto. Laging una yung positive charge kesa sa negative charge. That's the number 1 guideline. On the second guideline, cation and anion must give a net charge of 0. So, kailangan, kapag magkasama ng ating cation at anion, kailangan sila ay mag-i-equal sa 0. Paano yun? So, we will show this on our example later. Next, On the guideline number 3, ratio is expressed in the smallest whole number. Number 4 guidelines, the English name of the metal is always used. Yung English name natin ng isang metal, for example, sodium, kailangan yung pangalan ng sodium ang ating gagamitin sa kanya. And then number 5, an ion is English root plus the suffix IDE. So yung ating anion, which is the non-metal, kailangan kapag papangalanan natin siya, ay kailangan ay yung kanya ring English root name. Pagkatapos papalitan natin yung dulo ng IDE. So kung siya ay sulfur, mapapalitan yung dulo ng sulfur into sulfide once na nagkaroon tayo ng formation of ions. So para mas maintindihan natin yung guidelines natin, let us have an example. So for example, I have potassium bromide. Yan. So as you can see, potassium belongs to metal and then bromine belongs to a non-metal. So yung anion natin, anion which is the bromide, ang sabi, from the name bromine, papalitan mo yung dulo ng IDE. That's why ang dulo ng bromine ay naging bromide. So in naming an ion, kailangan ang dulo ay mapapalitan ng IDE. That's why it becomes potassium bromide. Papalitan mo ba yung sa cation? No need. Ang pagpapalit ay dun lamang sa anion, dun sa non-metal. So, for example, ang goal natin dito is to write its formula. So, i-write natin yung chemical formula ng potassium bromide. So, in writing the chemical formula of the potassium bromide, syempre alamin mo muna is the symbol. So, the symbol of potassium is K. The symbol of bromine is B, R. So, yan yung magiging chemical formula natin mamaya. So, in the chemical formula, alamin mo kung nasa ang group si potassium. Potassium is found on group 1A. Para guided ka. And then bromine is found on group 7A. Ngayon, dahil alam mo na kung saan grupo matatagpuan si potassium at si bromide, sabi natin kanina, group 1A has how many ions? The ion of potassium from group 1A will become positive 1. Kasi siya ay nasa group 1 at dahil siya ay isang metal, siya ay isang cation. Then on the bromine, bromine is found on group 7A. At dahil nasa 7A, ano ang kanyang ions? The ion of group 7A is negative 1. So after mong malaman ang kanilang ion, i-add mo yung dalawa. Positive 1 plus negative 1 will give you an answer of 0. Yun yung ating second guideline na kailangan kapag nagsama na ang cation at isang anion, anion must give a net charge of 0. Pag nag-equal sila sa 0, then tama ang ating gawa. Now, after mong malaman ang kanilang net charge na nag-equal sa 0, then you may now form the chemical formula. In writing the chemical formula, write the symbol of the element. So the symbol is K and B R. Ngayon, dahil chemical formula na ang ginagawa natin, magkadugtong na ngayon o magkatabi na ang dalawang symbol na potassium at bromine. Hindi kagaya dito kanina na magkahiwalay. Since hinahanap natin ang kanilang chemical formula as a whole, as magkasama, as chemical bonding, magkatabi na ngayon ang kanilang element. After mong ilagay ang kanilang symbol, saka mo ngayon isangat yung ating cation and anion. Dahil parehas number 1, ang number 1 ay hindi na kailangan pang isulat, so you just simply write the positive or the cation and the negative anion. And that would be the chemical formula for the potassium bromide. You have K positive and then Br negative to show the cation and the anion of the potassium. Okay, so let us have another example in writing a chemical formula of a compound. So for example, I have zinc oxide. Zinc oxide. So this is now an ionic compound, and we will form its chemical formula and show the ions of zinc and oxide. So as you can see, napalitan na yung pangalan ng oxygen. From oxygen, naging na siyang oxide. Basta you always take note in the ionic compound, you always change the suffix of the nonmetal or the anion from its original name into ending IDE. So that's become zinc oxide. Now, ang una mong gawin ay alamin ang symbol ng zinc at ng oxygen. So the symbol of zinc is Zn. The symbol of oxygen is O. So after knowing the symbol of the elements present in the compound, kung ano yung mga elements na meron sa compound, the next thing that you have to do is to identify their group. Nasaang group ba matatagpuan si zinc? So zinc is found on group number 2B. And then oxygen is found on group 6. Yan. So in the zinc of group 2B, na halos kaparehas din naman ng group 2A, as long as the group belongs to 2, how many ions does the zinc have? Ilang ions meron ng zinc? Of course, dalawa din. So it will have a charge of 2 positive for the zinc and oxygen. Found on group 6A, ang mga nasa 6 ay nag-gain ng dalawa. That's why they are having a charge of 2 negative. Next thing na gawin mo is to add the 2 charges. You may enclose it in a parenthesis para hindi ka malito sa positive and negative charge. 2 plus negative 2 will give you an answer of 0. So, pasok at tama ulit ang sagot natin para sa guideline number 2. Tama rin sa guideline number 1 kasi nauna natin ang cation kesa sa anion. Next one, after mong may produce ang net charge na nag-i-equal sa 0, then you may now name or give the chemical formula. In writing the chemical formula, unahin mong isulat ang symbol of Zn and then O. After writing the symbol of the elements present in the compound, then give its ion. Since nagbigay ng dalawa or nag-lose ng dalawa si zinc, it will have a charge of 2 positive. Kumbaga yung sinulat mo dito ay ililipat mo lang dito. And then oxygen gain 2 electrons. That's why it will have an ion of negative 2. And that's now the chemical formula for the zinc oxide. Okay, according to guideline number 3, the ratio is expressed in the smallest whole number. So the ratio will be dapat parehas. It should be 1:1. But what if there is an instances na hindi 1:1 or hindi pantay ang ratio natin? Paano kung mas malaki yung isa kesa dun sa isa? What will we do if the ratio is not 1:1? Paano kung 2:1? Or 3:1? Or 1:3? Paano kung ganyan? So, if there are instances na ang ating ratio ay hindi parehas, so dun papasok ang paglalagay ng subscript. Kailan tayo maglalagay ng subscript? Maglalagay lang tayo ng subscript if the ratio is not 1:1. Kapag hindi pantay ang ratio ng ions ng ating compound. Example. In writing the subscript, sa mathematics, inilalagay ang subscript sa baba ng, sa bandang baba. So, kung elements natin ay may symbol, sa tagiliran sa baba ng element natin ito ilalagay. Pero, magkakaroon tayo ng cross-charge method. So, kung maglalagay tayo ng subscript sa ating chemical formula, huwag mong kakalimutan ang cross-charge method. Anong ibig sabihin ng cross-charge method? Ang cross-charge method ay charge of cation and the charge of an ion will interchange or magpapalit ng charge ang cation at anion. Yung charge ng cation ay mapupunta sa anion at ang charge naman ng anion ay mapupunta sa cation. Ibig sabihin, magpapalitan sila ng dalawa. Magpapalitan ng subscript. So, para mas maintindihan natin ang ganitong klase ng compound, let us have an example of sodium sulfide. Okay, so sodium has a symbol of Na. Sulfide from the words sulfur dahil siya ay nasa compound na palitan ng kanyang dulo ng IDE. So, from sulfur, naging sulfide. So, the symbol of sulfide is still S. The next thing na gagawin mo is to identify their group. Na is found on group 1 and sulfur is found on group 6. So, ito yung sinasabi natin na hindi sila 1:1 ratio. Why? Because Na has only 1 electron to lose. And sulfur has 2 electrons to gain. Sabihin, isa lang ang kaya niyang ibigay. At si sulfur naman ay meron dalawang pangangailangan para maging stable ang kanyang atom. Now, on this case, alamin mo yung kanilang ion. So, i-add mo silang dalawa. Pero bago mo i-add, apply the cross-charge method. So, yung cross-charge method ay gagawin natin kapag tayo ay nag-a-add na ng charge. Kasi hindi sila mag-i-equal sa 0. And the number 3 guideline, the number 2 guideline is always to have a 0 net charge. Dahil hindi mag-i-equal sa 0 net charge ito, kailangan nating mag-cross ng charge. So, yung ating positive 1 ng sodium ay ililipat natin dito sa kabila. Kapag naglilipat tayo ng number papunta sa kabila, mababago ang kanyang sign. So, from being positive 1, kapag inilipat natin siya dito sa kabilang side, ito yung dalawang side natin. Ito yung plus sign. Itong positive, pag inilipat natin sa kabila, will become negative 1. And then, ito yung charge talaga ng sulfur. Next, yung negative 2 na charge ng sulfur, kapag inilipat natin sa kabilang side, negative 2 will become positive 2. So, it will become 2 positive, and then the positive 1 from the sodium. Positive 1 times positive 2 will give you 2 plus negative 1 times negative 2 will give you negative 2. 2 plus negative 2 is equals to 0. And that's now the net charge of sodium sulfide. So, para may equal natin sila sa 0, kailangan mong i-perform yung tinatawag na cross-charge method para ang guideline number 2 ay masusunod pa rin to have a 0 net charge. At dahil nag-cross ka ng charge from sodium and sulfide, kapag inilagay mo na ang chemical formula is Na, S, Na for the sodium, S for the sulfide. Dahil pinagpalit mo ng pwesto ang kanilang charges, yung 2 ng sulfur ay mapupunta sa subscript ng sodium, at yung 1 na charge ng sodium ay mapupunta sa sulfur na 1, pero ang 1 ay hindi na isinusulat, kaya hindi mo na ilalagay dyan ang 1. So, yan yung sinasabi nating subscript. Subscript is the result of the cross-charge method. Dahil pinag-cross natin sila, yung charge ay madadala, kaya napunta na dito ang 2, at yung 1 na ang nasa sulfur. So, let us have another example. Example, you are to give the chemical formula for the calcium phosphide. So, we have calcium, and then phosphide. Now, the calcium phosphide, the first thing that you have to do is to give the symbol of the element. Phosphide na dating phosphorus, dahil siya ay nasa chemical bonding, so nabago ang kanyang dulo ng IDE, now it becomes phosphide. Next thing, you have to identify its group number. So, dito pa lang, kitang-kita na natin na sila ay hindi equal sa 1:1 ratio. So, yung Ca natin has a positive 2 ions, so we have 2 positive. Plus, phosphorus is on group number 5. The ion of group number 5 is negative 3. So, meron ka dyan 3 negative. At dahil ang ating charge ay hindi 1:1 ratio, kailangan natin mag-perform ng tinatawag na cross-charge method. So, in the cross-charge method, yung positive 2 ni calcium ay dadalhin mo sa kabila. Pag dinala mo sa kabila, it will become negative 2. And then, the charge of 3 sa phosphorus, pag dinala mo dito sa kabila, will become positive 3. So, i-multiply natin ang tigkabilang side. 3 times 2 is 6. Plus negative 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. 6 plus negative 6 will give you 0. So, na-achieve na natin ang net charge of 0. So, you may now show me the chemical formula for the calcium phosphide. In giving the chemical formula, write again the symbol of the two elements na nabanggit sa compound, and then write the subscript. Dahil tayo ay nagpalitan ng charge, yung charge ni calcium na 2 ay mapupunta sa phosphorus, at yung charge naman ni phosphorus ay napunta sa kabila. So, dito mapupunta yung 3. And then the chemical formula for the calcium phosphide is Ca3P2. So that is how we show the formation of ions in a chemical compound such as ionic compounds. Okay, so let us have this example, which is magnesium sulfide. So, in the discussion kanina doon sa mga 1:1 ratio, may nalimutan lang ako sa dulong part. Now, on magnesium sulfide, so the symbol of magnesium is Mg, and the symbol of sulfide is S. From the sulfur, naging sulfide because of the ionic compound, and it should be changed into IDE, so naging sulfide. So, yung magnesium sulfide natin, magnesium is group 2, sulfur is in group 6. So, obviously, there is 1:1 ratio. Bakit 1:1 ratio? Because magnesium has to lose 2 electrons, and sulfur has to gain 2 electrons. So, the ratio is 2:2, parehas. Wala tayong gagawing cross charge method. Now, after mo malaman kung nasang group nila, then give me the charge of their ions. So, Mg will have 2 positive, plus sulfur has a charge of 2 negative. So, positive 2 plus negative 2 is equals to 0. So, we achieve the net charge of 0. So, after mong mabigay ang charge at napag-minus mo na ang kanilang charges, in writing the chemical formula, we have magnesium Mg, and then sulfur is S. Magnesium lose 2 electrons, so you have here positive 2. Sulfur gain 2 electrons, so meron tayo ditong 2 negative. I forgot to discuss the ratio is expressed in the smallest whole number. So, yung ratio natin, which is 2 and 2, should be written in their smallest whole number. So, in writing the chemical formula, supposed to be, pwede yung Mg2 S2 because of their ions of 2 positive and negative 2 for magnesium and sulfur. Pero dahil kailangan nasa smallest whole number tayo at kaya pa nating i-convert into smaller number ang 2:2, which is divide. So, pwede pa siyang maging whole number 1. Kaya, the chemical formula will be Mgs as its smallest whole number. Alam natin na nag-give off sila ng dalawa at nag-gain ng dalawa. Pero dahil kailangan in the smallest whole number, then the chemical formula will be as simple as the symbol Mgs. Wala na yung charges of positive 2 and negative 2, just the number, whole number. Pero dahil naigawa natin sa smallest whole number, we have as simple as Mgs as their chemical formula. And that's it for our discussion today about the formation of ions in the inorganic compounds. So in the lesson, we just simply discuss how ionic compounds form their ions, and ions are formed through the cation and anion of gaining and losing electrons. So we just simply discuss how to make the chemical formula of the inorganic compounds using their ions or their charges. Now, I hope that you understand and gain something in our lesson today. So this lesson will help you a lot in answering your module number 3 for the week 3 of Science 9. I hope to see you again for my next video lesson for module number 4. And this ends our discussion today. Don't forget to subscribe on my YouTube channel to be updated for the new video lessons. Bye!